Leadership development exists because we all have room for growth in our lives and we need help along the way. I don't actually remember the intro. We're going to roll with it. Hi, and welcome to a live recording of the Developing Imperfect Leaders podcast.
Because the last time I checked, we're not Jesus.
This podcast is a production of Hope Community, the LDI, the Leadership Development Institute of Hope Community Church, intended to help you explore and grow your leadership skills for service both inside and outside the church. I'm your hyper-prepared host, Paul Stiver, who just botched that intro, and we're doing a special episode right now, and so I'm not going to necessarily introduce everyone just yet, but we are right now, if you're listening later on and you're not seeing what we're seeing, we're doing a live recording of a 3-episode series called Developing Female Leaders. Actually, it's going to be a 4th episode I didn't even think about. So we're going to record this now, this panel interview conversation with 5 female leaders who work and serve and live and lead inside the church and outside Hope's walls. And we're going to interview them and hear what it's like to be a female leader and all kinds of beautiful, wonderful things about how the gospel integrates into their lives and leadership. And I don't know what else I was going to say, so let's get right into it. So the first thing I want to hear is we want to hear about you. So say your name and tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe what you do, your Hope Connection, anything else you would like to share that you feel like we need to know.
Hi, everybody. My name is Allison Stiver. I work at the University of Minnesota Foundation. I raise money for the medical school in the neurosciences department. I have been a Hopester for 15 and a half years, so dating back to when I was a freshman at the U. I was on the St. Paul campus, so I rode the Hope van, not the bus, the van, because that was back when the connector didn't run. So literally the only way to get off St. Paul campus was to go to church, and that's how I picked my church.
It was you and the cows on St. Paul.
You bet.
Yep.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm Martha Whiting. I am a ophthalmology resident at the University of Minnesota, and not everybody knows what ophthalmology is, but that's doing eye surgery. So I'm in my last of 4 years of training and about to be cut loose into the real world.
Cut loose.
Don't cut my eye loose.
Surgeon fun. Right.
Well, I've been going to Hope now for 2 years, and I have the privilege of just starting a new small group, so leadership in a lot of different forms.
Hi, everyone. My name is Elise Brock, and I work in the medical device industry in an innovation and strategy role. I've been coming to Hope since 2017, and that was after I moved back from Chicago in grad school. I live in Plymouth, Minnesota with my husband and my 2.5-year-old daughter with a second baby on the way in June. So happy to be here.
Yay. I'm Kaelyn Larson. I am on staff at Hope. I am the Associate Director of Communications and Discipleship, and I work with small groups in LDI and communications. Do the weekly newsletter.
Oh, I thought you were done there. Sorry. And I already introduced myself, but I'll do it again for those of you who are listening. I'm Naty Severson, and I work at Hope, and you probably know that because you're a listener of this podcast. I work at Hope, and I work with our Leadership Development Institute, our small groups, and our college students, so that's kind of a blast. My husband and I have lived in Columbia Heights, Minnesota for long time, and we have 3 adult kids now. We are empty nesters, all 3 in college at the same time, though. So if you're planning your financial future, maybe avoid that reality. Oh, and one's getting married, so that's just easy, too. Yeah.
Great. Naty loves to kick us off with a Would You Rather, so let's hear about it.
So if you're a devoted listener of this show and we are just reaching the point in season 2 where we start asking would you rather questions, and so this will air in season 3, and so we'd like to ask the would you rather question. So because you all go to Hope and because you all know me, the would you rather question is of course involving me. So would you rather spend an entire sermon with an earpiece in and have to shout out everything I tell you to shout out? Or would you rather stand directly behind the preaching pastor and do every hand motion, mannerism, or statue type pose that I do in the back of the church?
Oh my gosh.
Now you have to pick one. It's not like you can't escape it. You have to pick one. So it's shouting from, maybe you could hide a little bit, or it's on stage, but at least you don't have to say anything.
I'd mock the pastor.
You'd mime?
Yeah.
Mime, okay.
Yeah.
You're not miming, you're miming what
You're miming what I do.
So you're doing her moves.
You're doing what I want.
Yeah.
Thanks for
still pick that one.
mansplaining that,
Yep.
man.
No problem. Thanks for bringing that word into the episode. We needed that. So what mansplaining is, in case you didn't understand. All right, I'm done.
I absolutely agree. I would definitely be on the stage miming. I don't have a loud voice in general, so that would cause me terrible stage fright even from the back of the room to be yelling things.
So,
but I do not mind to do interpretive dances from the front.
Oh, I'd have you dancing, that's for sure.
So I usually love to be a contrarian, but I actually also choose the choreography moves just because I feel like gesticulation is such an important thing that we need more of it.
Wow. Wow.
I don't know. I don't trust you. But my initial thought was the earpiece.
The earpiece. I would have way more fun with the earpiece. That'd be my secret dream to like, you know, like you guys know riff tracks? To like do that, but for Hope sermons. It'd be so funny. All right, that's enough.
All right, so you guys can think through that too. What would you choose? But let's get into the first question here, or well, I guess second question. What does leadership mean to you? How does your faith in Christ and your belief in the gospel impact your view of leadership?
Yeah, I think I'll kick off with this one. I think there are many definitions of what leadership could be. One that resonates with me is enabling people to do more than they would otherwise achieve on their own, and also realizing a goal or a vision along the way. I think it's very easy to think of leadership as a title, like the leader of a company, like a CEO, or the leader of our country, like the president. But I really believe that anybody in any corner of an organization can lead from their respective seat. I also feel that that's like the what of what leadership is, but there's also a how. So how do you go about leading? When I was at grad school, as I referenced in Chicago, there's a style of leadership that was kind of talked about as high impact, low ego leadership. And that was something that at the time resonated with me. And I think really because of growing up in the church and seeing how Christ is kind of the ultimate example of that high impact, low ego leadership. And so those are a couple thoughts. We see that in Jesus' ministry, both in the way that he was humble and yet spoke honestly about the truth, and also the way in which he mobilized his disciples to come along in his work and carry it out. And so that's been inspiring for me.
I loved what you said about enabling them to do more than they thought. That's very powerful. I thought about like the influence and impact that you might have on people that you are leading. And so I think leadership isn't a small task, and there's a responsibility that comes with it. And so allowing the Spirit to work through, hopefully through me, to not be what you were saying, not a domineering leader, but a leader that more reflects Christ to those that I am leading.
Yeah, I'd say there's a wide range of definitions for this, but two that I really hold on to when I think about leaders that I would want to follow are just the main culture setter. Like who are they as a person? And so I think about who I am as a person. Would I have people? Would people want to follow me? And a big part of that is being the first person to admit when you're wrong, showing vulnerability. And I think about. I know around Hope we talk about hope, stability, trust, compassion, and we're bringing it back to the gospel. I'm okay in Jesus. I don't have to have it completely right. I can show when I'm when I mess up or when I fail, because I can trust in the one who perfectly fulfills all four of those qualities. So being able to create space for other people to say, hey, here's where I messed up, and it just allowing that to give that away, I think more people tend to follow.
I think that's a very attractive form of leadership, and it's one that we don't often see in the public sphere for sure. And to me, just very basic leadership is showing people who don't know where to go, where to go and how to get there. You can think of like even when you're a kid, follow the leader, right? We're all following in a straight line. But yeah, leadership can come in so many forms, and how the world views leadership is like Napoleon, right? I'm out there, I'm conquering, I'm just expanding my own value, versus how our faith might impact leadership is very different. It's self-sacrificial. It's choosing the needs of others. And that looks very different than if you would choose like maybe the top of your med school class and, you know, your school body president. So I do think that following Jesus and letting your faith guide your leadership strategy stands apart from what people are used to seeing, and it changes people's hearts in a completely different way.
I went super basic. Like, I just went, what is, well, somebody follows you. Like, what is leadership? People follow you. And I know there's arguments made for real leadership is always positive. I've heard that because I always say, oh, people follow. Leadership is always positive. But I guess it's not always positive, right? You can lead people in a lot of directions. You can lead people in very unhealthy or actually like harmful, potentially harmful or actually harmful ways. So I was like, yeah, it's just essentially people follow. But how does the gospel then impact that? I think for me, I wrote that it makes me think about others before myself when I don't think I would. You know, the way I would have led before I became a follower of Christ is going to be different, or what I would have led people in, or how I would have done that would be really different than how I would do it now, or I would have, I think, made people believe I had their best interests in mind while I secretly had my own, but now I just realize Christ has shown me what it means to lay down my own preferences, my own needs, or what I hope to accomplish in light of what God has to accomplish and what's good for other people.
All right. What do you love about being a female leader?
I wrote menstruation. That's not true. But as we were discussing earlier, Kaelyn, that's funny because it's ironic. It's not true, but I toyed with whether or not I should say that on the podcast. But now we've broken the ice on the word menstruation, so I think we can use it all night long if we want to. Since I said it
Check
first.
it off on your bingo card.
Yeah, Some little kids listen in their mom's car and they're like, "Mommy."
Okay.
Just no, don't kids, don't ask. No, I actually wrote that it's great to be a female leader because I think women just are strong and they're like uniquely strong and encouraging and resourceful and just exciting to be around in their own unique way that I've seen. It's different to be in a room with other women than even a mixed gender room or a room with men. And they're all great things. It's not a minimalizing any of those, but I just think it's fun to see the unique tenacity and like just, I don't know, I'm struggling for words. Again, the mic is really blocking my notes here, so I'm just gonna pass it over.
That is my life, every episode.
Why don't you keep talking? Because this is weird dead air.
When I thought about this question, I said, because it's all that I know, like, I don't know what it's like to be a man in leadership. So that's what I like about it. But now that I have two little girls and thinking about the role that I'm playing in their life, I get to now be that example that other women have been for me in the past. And it makes me excited and thankful to have that opportunity, not only to then be part of their life, but then the lives of other kids as well, like your daughter. I get to love her as well.
It's true. Penny does love Auntie Kay. For me, I think some of my answers that came to mind weren't necessarily like uniquely female descriptors, but I love having the ability to make an impact and kind of that multiplication effort that I talked about in my definition of leadership. That really is something that's inspiring to me. I think when I started my career, I was very much excited about my own individual contributions, but as I've progressed, then I get more fired up around seeing others on my team have that success and coaching them in that. I would also say that as a people manager at work, it is really cool to be able to coach people both in their work domain about how to kind of enhance their work product or navigate something, but I also really love the idea of being their coach for life to the extent that there's trust and relationship to be able to do that. I think the Bible calls us to love our neighbor as ourselves, and so coworkers I view as some of our greatest neighbors, and so the opportunity to have an impact and front row seat to their life is very exciting to me. The other dimension of this is just kind of that we're all uniquely made and God has given us each different strengths and abilities. And so being able to lead and have that impact has been a fun way to put his gifts on display and to kind of serve in that way, even in a secular capacity.
One thing I think is really cool about female leaders is that God has kind of given women a natural capacity to be motherly and highly perceptive, and that's a very different type of leadership than what you might expect someone who is not genetically inborn to be motherly. Particularly in my field, I did mechanical engineering in undergrad and then ophthalmology. Both of those are historically very male-dominated fields, and so I haven't had a lot of female mentors. So one of the most exciting things about getting to be a leader at this point is that now I know that other people have someone to look up to that they've been looking forward to looking up to, and just hearing about my experience, because I haven't necessarily had that yet, and it's great to get to know that other people are going to have that just by seeing that I've kind of paved the way. And I'm certainly not the first to go ahead, but I think the more people that go into the fields that you're in, the more helpful that is.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with everything you all said. I think for me too, I love the idea of representing other women and bringing women's perspectives to things in the arenas that I have leadership in. I also really enjoy surprising people. I think women know what it's like to be discounted because of their gender, and I really enjoy making people realize that maybe they didn't have the first impression right about me. And I also
I love that.
You gonna tell a story or?
no, I'm not
Okay,
going to tell any
all
stories. A little bit to what you had said, Martha. I love the way that women are unique, right? We're not just we don't have to fight just the battle of like women can do this too, or men and women, right? I think there's something really unique about women are made uniquely in the image of God in ways that men aren't, and I think that that's a responsibility and a humility that we're tasked with, and it's an honor to be a woman that's made in the image of God, and not that just and women too, right? I think there's something really powerful about we were designed with intention.
I don't know if you said during your intro that we're married. You are my wife, and you made a good first impression on me. You didn't surprise me, or did you? You did. I was surprised.
I've heard stories. I think she did. I think.
That's how it should be mentioned, maybe at some point today. But let's keep rolling. What is difficult about being a female leader?
So this could be a female problem or an anybody problem, or maybe it's just a me problem. But the thing that's difficult is the lies that come into my head all the time. And so even when we were preparing for this podcast, I was telling Paul and Naty, I do not feel equipped to answer any of these questions. And Paul just gets upset. And he's like, "Oh, what are you talking about?" And then he tells me.
He really does. He kind of yells at her. He's like, "Why do you underestimate yourself all the time?" He's like a football coach.
And then I'm like, "Okay, tell me what to say." No, but it's
Martha,
true.
if you could swing in with some of that motherly compassion, that'd be great.
But in the times that the lies are very loud in my head, I become more reserved and I don't feel like I can speak up unless someone specifically calls on me, because it's kind of like, oh, well, they all have it figured out, and what am I actually going to bring to the table? And then if I do say something, I'm like questioning myself. I'll go into, there's like a specific meeting, I'll go into Davis's or your office, and I'll be like, did that land? Because I don't know if it did. And anyways, so I question myself a lot. And I think it's not because of anything men are doing in the room. It's just something that the enemy is doing in my mind.
Yeah. I can add on to that, because I do think that finding your voice is something that can be a challenge. I know that for me, something that's helped me work through that is when I'm able to advocate for others, I have no problem finding a voice, because it's very clear and easy for me to be assertive and kind of put that perspective out there. But I've had to learn how to advocate for myself, and so I resonate with what you're saying. I would also add that some of the traditional gender roles have been difficult for me to kind of work through. I came from a home where my mother was a full-time caregiver, and she and my dad often talk about and celebrate how that was such a good thing for our family, and I truly believe that it was. And my parents have always been very supportive of my corporate career, and often tell me how very proud they are of me and are very sweet about it. But I will say, as I was starting out my career journey, there were times when I felt this inner conflict of, I'm going a different way than what I saw modeled. Is this a way that is good for my future family, even when, I was more of a single person or a newly married person? And so I think that's something that probably is uniquely female, because I'm not sure if men necessarily feel that same inner conflict about making a choice in that way. But I'm very grateful for the support that I've had along the way from friends and families and mentors to kind of say that, right now this is what my life looks like, and it's really wonderful. And that doesn't mean that it will always be that way, but it's been a gift for me.
I think for me, two things. One is that you're kind of, when you're trying to pave a new way of what it looks like to be a female leader, that also includes including maternity leave in your contracts in ways that you're looking at all the other men at the practice where you would like to work don't have to deal with that. And you have to ask yourself, am I just as valuable? Am I not? And that's something you have to wrestle through. And it's hard to do that without mentors who have been through that. They're like, it's not a problem. You're just as valuable. So I definitely struggle with the feeling like, am I cut out for this? Or am I just as valuable? And we are. Those are lies in your head. It's really hard to kind of fight through those two things. And then also, I'm just a little bit, my leadership strategy maybe is different than my male counterparts, and I tend to be a little bit more soft-spoken. And so sometimes when there is conflict, that can be challenging to feel like I have my voice. And I said that at the beginning too, right? I don't want to be up there yelling loudly. That's not kind of who I am. And so realizing that there is a balance of joyfully getting to be a little bit more soft-spoken and gentle in my leadership strategy, but also realizing that you have to try to meet everybody where they're at and rise to the occasion in a way. So, yeah.
So maybe you and I could wear earpieces from each other, and we'd have to swap words for one day just to see how it feels to live in the shoes of the other person. I didn't write menstruation on this one, but I easily could have. I think that
This is the question I thought she was referring to, and I was like, "Why is that funny?"
it's funny.
It's funny for
It's funny.
Yes.
It's funny. I'm funny. No, I wrote that I think that women can often be under-encouraged. That's one of the things that I think can be tough. And it's not because people don't want to encourage women. It's not like, and specifically in my environment, because I've worked at Hope for the last, coming up on 18 years. So it's like the bulk of my adult career life now has been at Hope. And I feel very encouraged. But I think the system maybe is set up to not encourage or resource women as much. I think of like opportunities or like even pushing toward, like, especially in the church, a lot of things are for men. Like the leadership opportunities are for men. So I see some of that, like, oh, that's difficult. Not at Hope specifically, but all these conferences, all the speakers are men. All the keynote speakers are men. And while they have awesome things to say, right, and I'm learning from them and growing from them and respect them, it still would be nice to like see more women represented and some of that thought at some of those like big conferences. At Hope, though, I feel like, and I could go on, this could be a whole nother podcast, and maybe that could be a podcast. I don't feel that as much, and we'll talk, I think we're going to talk about that in another question, so I'll put a pause on that. And I just wrote that, we all know the Barbie speech, right? By now, you've all heard the speech, America Ferrera's speech in Barbie. And you're like, you listen to it as a woman, you're like, it's true, all these double standards and stuff that really do exist. And we might not all be able to relate to all of those things, but it's laughable because you could kind of take a highlighter and be like, oh, I felt that today. I felt that. We were joking that Paul would read the speech at some point on behalf of us.
He did at the LDI retreat.
He did do it at the LDI retreat, but not for the recording. But I really think of that like as like a woman who has been loud and bold since birth, probably. Like you're either a chucklehead or bossy, right? You're not like necessarily a smart, innovative leader. You're bossy, or you're like, oh, you're just, we don't need to take her seriously because she's funny. But if a guy was witty and a good leader, you'd call him like an excellent leader, not a chucklehead to dismiss or bossy, right? And so just stuff like that, it can be interesting, I think, when you're a woman. And that's definitely across, I would assume, all venues, because I haven't just worked at churches, so I've experienced that in life.
I'm going to throw a little wrinkle in based on some of these answers, and just throw a question that you didn't prepare for.
What?
But I don't
Can
think
I
it
answer the
hits-
last one first?
I don't. Yeah, but I don't. Oh, did you go yet?
I haven't
oh, sorry.
answered that one.
You should jump in and answer this one.
I think that I should.
Sorry, Daddy looked at me like we were moving on. I'm blaming everyone. All right, I'll stop.
I'm gonna have Martha fix my gaze with the surgery, because I thought looking at your wife, but
Those
they were.
prisms aren't doing it for you, Naty. I would say, in addition to, you checked off a lot of what I already had. So I would say one thing in particular that I don't know was mentioned here is not having good ideas and not having them recognized as good ideas until they're championed by someone else. That one is particularly challenging, right? Like, it's all your work and your hard work, and then it's not really accounted for until it's someone else says it on your behalf. And of course, like you look around and you say, I've worked twice as hard to get even to where my male counterpart is. And that doesn't mean that they're not working incredibly hard, but to say like all of the things that I put in is double the work that you have, and to still be considered at the same level, that one I would say is particularly challenging.
All right, I'm going to go off script a little bit. Great answer. And I'm really glad we got that answer and didn't forget it. I wanted, they're kind of one of the themes that came up a little bit is advocacy, self-advocacy. And everyone has to kind of do it in their career journey. It's not uniquely female, and yet there are going to be challenges and different things. I'd love to hear, just kind of off the cuff, because it doesn't necessarily fit with the other questions. What has advocating for yourself, and it could be career journey, life journey, looked like?
Good question. You can edit out the long pauses back there, right, Austin? Yeah, he wrote in his note.
It's okay, it's a new
when
question.
we film the podcast or record it, Austin has a notebook, and we know whenever we do something weird, like make a weird noise or say something weird or have a long pause, because he immediately starts writing in his little journal. He's like, oh, that means there's an audio edit. Quit swearing, Paul. No, I'm just kidding.
Too many F-bombs. That's his feedback to me every time.
Just stop.
Cut him.
Have we talked long enough to give you time to think?
I just told her that's what
Martha
she's
had a
doing.
really
She's
great
stalling.
example
Oh,
of,
great.
writing maternity leave into your own contract when it's not been considered. I would say
Oh my gosh. Okay, yeah.
that I think women in particular, I can't say a specific example, but for me, I just noticed the theme of you kind of have to explain your work to people for them to understand that you're working hard. So, and you can do it in humility, but to say, I did this, and you can take ownership of it, I think is a unique way to advocate for yourself. When I think typically it's you put your head down and you do a good job and someone will tap you on the shoulder. It just is not the way women get recognized, or most people I would say, but particularly women don't get recognized. So you kind of have to say, this is what I did and I did a good job at it. And I think you can do it with humility, but it's just one of the ways you have to advocate for yourself.
I have to advocate for myself to myself because I'm sometimes my own worst enemy. And one thing that women doctors in training experience as they're going through their training is the stages of grief of recognizing that everybody thinks you're a nurse. And so you walk into the room, the patients are like, when am I going to see the doctor? And you're like, initially you're like, I am the doctor. And then a few years later, you're actually like, it'll just be another moment. Hi, I'm Dr. Whiting. Nice to meet you. And then you get a laugh, and it's a completely different experience. So it's just like learning how to not be offended by the things that are struggles, but just to like embrace them and not let them get to my head, not let them waste my heartbeats and feel stressed about them, but just acknowledging that we do have a different path, the different struggles, and that's okay, and it can still be joyful.
I think that's great. Hi, I'm actually the doctor. Nice to meet you. I think that advocacy and advocacy can feel risky at times, but I also feel like there are ways to make it seem less risky. A couple that come to mind, first is expertise. So building expertise and credibility in the area that you are working in or the project that you're working on can kind of give you that inner confidence to want to speak up. Second, I would say, is gaining allies. So knowing who are the people in the room that can be there to reinforce something if it's controversial or to add on, and to use their voices to amplify your own is a really powerful way to build advocacy for yourself. I think also as we think of advocacy, sometimes, and it was mentioned earlier, being director, assertive, or boss, you can kind of feel not great as a female leader. And so a tool of being able to signal flexibility by using assertiveness, but creating options. So here's 2 paths that we can take. I'd recommend this one is a way that can signal, okay, and also show perspective that you've thought of other scenarios, but can kind of make it seem like you aren't overbearing in that recommendation as you struggle, or if you are struggling with feeling like advocating is a challenge.
I think because I work at Hope, I listened in Elise and I are in small group together, and she'll say stuff and I'm like, oh, I just don't experience that in my job, which I mean, I work at a church versus working in the marketplace. But I feel like the places where I advocate for myself is if I feel hurt by something. So I'll
It's
go.
normally me or Paul.
So I looked right at her. No. But I'll instead of letting it kind of stew in my head, it's like, oh, when this happened, this is how I felt. And standing up for myself in that way, because I don't think I grew up with that of advocating for how I felt. And so having to grow in understanding my feelings and then feeling confident in sharing them.
Martha, my initial reaction was something really similar to yours. So it's probably field specific in some ways. When I tell people I work at a church, they immediately ask, if they continue to ask questions, the ultimate conversation killer is to tell somebody who doesn't go to church that you work at a church, because then they're like, oh, giant record scratch. I don't even know what to say next. If I say something wrong, will lightning strike me or what? I don't know what they're thinking, but they either assume I work in children's ministry or in an office. And I have an office, but I don't work in an office. Or it's shocking how many times I've been asked at Hope if my job is full-time. They just assume that there's probably not anything for me to do full-time, but I think if they were talking to a man on our staff team, they would never ask that question of whether or not my job was able to fill 40, 50 hours in a week like other people's jobs. And so I have to do that. They don't mean anything by it. So if you always ask me that, I don't even remember it was you. I trust me, because it's happened so many times. If you go to Hope, maybe you think I work once a month for 5 minutes while I give announcements. I don't know. I don't know. So it's you got to kind of grieve that. And I'm still, I've been doing this a long time, and I'm 47 years old, and I still am like, yep, people will look at me different than men. I think just because of the nature of culture, but then also the subculture of Christianity. I think Hope is a really cool place in that regard. And we are going to talk about it. I did look at my notes. But have you noticed one of the things I read was women say I think and I feel a lot. We could count the number of times we apologize for something we say, or we begin a sentence with I think or I feel in a way. Men just declare it. It's like if it's coming out of my mouth, it must be how I think or feel. And so we hedge a lot in the way we talk, and I've noticed that. But we do it to soften the blow so people don't feel like we're bossing them around or some of those things. So that's an interesting thing. But one of the things that I've noticed is the difference between men and women is because I oversee our internship program, and of course there's just a huge variety of people, right? So not every man fits all these gender norms of male, and not all these women fit all these gender norms of female. But in general, women aren't confident to be the kind of leader they are wired to be in a way men aren't. And so they'll get a little bit intimidated because they'll be like, well, I can't lead like Naty, so I can't lead. I'm like, no, you shouldn't lead like Naty. You should lead like you. And so I find that I'm having a lot of conversations advocating for them to be them uniquely themselves, uniquely who God created them to be with their unique gifting. Like, I'm not calling Martha to like want to, like shout out things during the sermon. I mean, I want to do that to you now because now it would be so awesome. Then we'll put it on Snapchat and we'll go viral.
That's where
That was
we
a
go.
joke. That was a joke. Come on. All the college students in
Let's
the
throw
front
it on-
row are like,
we'll throw it
oh,
online."
she's wearing white sneakers and telling bad jokes.
Well, that wraps up our conversation for today. But we want to keep connecting with you. So thank you for listening to the podcast. And if you like what you heard, be sure to follow our show and leave a review. We love connecting with our listeners. So if you have questions, comments, or topic ideas, please email us ldi@hopecc.com. LDI is a ministry of Hope Community Church based in Minneapolis, Minnesota. We seek to develop leaders in their biblical thinking, Christ-like character, and ministry skills for service both inside and outside the church. We do this through internships, classes, seminars, and retreats. If you're interested in learning more about our internships or other opportunities, visit ldi.hopecc.com or email ldi@hopecc.com. Have a great week.